Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Mark, for that fascinating talk. I did say, interesting for me as founder and trustee of the Dallaglio Foundation. I've just come from a trustee meeting, actually, quite honestly, and we were talking about some of the new legislation that's coming into effect. So it's very, very relevant for all of us. We don't tend to have too many internal disputes in the Dallaglio Foundation. It's been an absolutely amazing, I hope you'll all agree, amazing and inspiring few months for all of us, and I mean truly amazing. And Mark, your daughter has been part of that, and I'm sure we'd all like to say what a wonderful time and what a huge congratulations to her and to everyone for what they've done. I was brought up here in London, not far from here, and was very, very excited at the prospect of hosting the Olympic Games. I've been known to be rather patriotic, if anyone's seen me singing the national anthem. I certainly regard myself as truly British, and some people might say with a name like Lorenzo Bruno Nero Dallaglio, what right would I have to that patriotism? But I can assure you, with an Italian father and an Irish mother, I am in fact rather dangerous Englishman. Like many of you, I've been utterly blown away, I hope, by in the last few weeks, and blown away by the truly inspiring performances of our amazing Great Britain team and the squads, not only the Olympic team, but just recently the incredible, probably more inspired actually by the Paralympic team and what they've really achieved. And brimming with pride as well at how we've put on one of the most spectacular events on earth, with the whole world watching and scrutinising our every move. And I, like many of you, I'm sure, have been through virtually every possible emotion. My wife couldn't quite believe I was watching archery, but I was been through every single emotion. And actually, they talked about inspiring the next generation. That seems to be the real message that came through from the last few weeks, last few months. But actually, what about this generation? What about us in the room? I think we've all been inspired right here, right now. And I hope it's not too corny to suggest that actually it's reinforced for me, certainly, the power of the human spirit, not just individually in what we've seen in the performances, but actually collectively in terms of the teams, but the teams behind the teams as well, all the volunteers. And it's really, when we talk about charities, I think it's important to tap into the power of the human spirit. We'll get on to that later. Now, a quick bit of background information on my good self. I am 40 years old. Again, I look a lot older than that, but that's what rugby union does for you. And I only turned 40 a few weeks ago. I retired 4 years ago from playing professional rugby and had a wonderful, wonderful time. I played 19 years for one club, London Wasps, just up the road. And I was involved, I was working in the property business before I played rugby, and I obviously gave that up. Property wasn't looking too clever in the late 80s, early 90s, so I thought I'd give rugby a go and never looked back really, and played professional rugby. And then more recently, while I was still playing professional rugby, I was involved I got myself back involved in the business world. I just about had enough brain cells to read again, and I got involved in a business and moved that forward, sold the business latterly, and am now back involved in that corporate environment. But certainly had a most incredible time, rubbing shoulders with some of the best people. And during that 19 years of playing rugby for London Wasps, I managed to play 12 years for England in the English national team, earning 85 caps. And was fortunate enough to captain the side as well on a few occasions, as well as go on and play for the British and Irish Lions, which is very, very exciting. But almost my entire playing career was spent in the professional era, as I've mentioned before, and it was at London Wasps. But I did play in the amateur days, and when I say amateur days, I mean the good old amateur days. And I look at teams today. I don't know about you, but I still watch a bit of rugby. I'm not hugely involved outside of my media commitments, but I do watch quite a bit of rugby, and I notice that there's so many people around the team now. They've got forwards coaches, they've got backs coaches, attack and defence coaches, they've got kicking coaches. They've got strength and conditioning, nutrition, physiotherapists, psychologists. I mean, it really is a huge array of coaches, even eyesight coaches, which is quite interesting. But sometimes you watch the game and they still put in a performance which demonstrates little in the way of anything cohesion or even a game plan, actually. So as we've seen over the last few months, great teams are made up of great individuals. Everyone says there's no I in team. It's actually strictly not true, as we all know, because in order to be a great team, you've got to be a great individual within that team. So it is about how you look after yourself first and foremost, and then obviously how you integrate that within the team environment. And I think that was part of our learning curve over the period of time. I've talked to Matthew Pinson, who I know was here last year speaking to you, and I'm sure 4 of them made a great team in the boat. Or 2 of them, or however many they decide to have. But first and foremost, as individuals, they've got to be exceptional. And I think for us, it was about looking and coaching the individual rather than coaching the team. When you're involved in lots of team environments, you spend ages together as a team, which is obviously quite important. But actually, it's about breaking down each individual and coaching them. And I know it's something that I'm passionate about, and Clive and some of the other guys are, because we decided that if we could arrive at a World Cup final and we had 8 or 10 players in our team who were the best individuals in their team in their position in the world, then undoubtedly we'd have a very good chance of doing something that we really wanted to do, which was win the World Cup. You can't always guarantee that, of course, because there's some very good players out there. But I think we were focused on the individuals within the team and making sure that we had gold medalists in at least 8 of our team would have won a gold medal in their individual position. And there's going to be some setbacks along the way. I think business, sport, charity, whatever, we all get setbacks. And I can assure you, as captain of England, losing to Scotland at Murrayfield on one occasion is enough. Losing to Wales at Wembley on one occasion is enough. And I think, but it's about how we learn from those setbacks in sport and in our lives as well. And that's something that we certainly, the lessons we took on board with the team. And we lost to Wales at Wembley when we probably still had an opportunity to win the game. And no one spoke to each other for about 4 or 5 days, which wasn't, it was a very tough time. And then I think once the dust had settled, we sort of sat down very honestly and said, right, if that ever happens to us again, we ever get to a situation where, we've got 30 seconds, we're losing, we need to win the game, we absolutely need to know what we're doing and have a routine that will get us over the line. And, in many ways, we got ourselves into that situation 4 years later in Sydney where, we needed 30 seconds, we needed to come up with a play, to win the game. And the other turning point for all of us actually was a little trip we spent down with the Royal Marines in Lympstone, who are one of the best fighting units, one of the best soldier units in the world. And it was quite interesting for us because when you lose a game of rugby, or when you play a game of rugby, you win, it's great. If you lose, you get up the next morning and you're disappointed, and you're probably disappointed for quite a few days, but you're able to piece things back together and learn the mistakes. I think what came across very clearly when we spent some time with the Royal Marines was that if the decisions that they make, actually are the difference between someone getting back on the helicopter or not getting back on the helicopter, which is obviously very extreme because people don't lose games, they lose their lives. And I think that it sort of changed our mindset a little bit around. You might call it a little bit serious. You might think it's a bit extreme, but we sort of started to approach sport in the sense that it was a matter of life and death, and it did make a difference to us, the decisions that we made. And it's quite interesting because I was listening to 3 Special Forces soldiers that were talking, and they were telling a story about situations in Afghanistan and Iraq that they found themselves in, and we were given a test to go away in our little groups of England players and think about how we would have got ourselves out of that situation that they just explained. And, it was fun. It was a fun thing to try and do. And when you listen to them articulate what the situation they're in, you're thinking, well, there's no way out of that situation. There's absolutely no way out. So we went away and we sort of put together we had a little workshop with the clock ticking. We came back, presented our ideas, and of course we were a million miles away from the truth. And then they came back and represented the scenario that got them out of that situation and back on the helicopter. And when you listen to it, there was sort of quite a lot of method in what they were doing. And, of course, it made total sense. So it made us completely change our mindset around decision-making for a high-class performance team. Not saying we put on the camo and backpacks and got the guns out or anything, but we certainly became much more around practicing scenarios and looking at situations and working under pressure. So we'd sit in a room and say, right, we've got this scrum, 30 seconds to go, we're losing by 2 points, you make the call, clock's on, what's the call? And we go through these various scenarios, and I think it made such a massive difference when you're in that pressure environment. Chris Hoy, when he's got to make a decision about when he goes past, and all the things that I've seen, it all comes flooding back to you really, because it is about practicing. And what's really impressed me over the last couple of months has been the humility that's been shared by so many of the athletes when you listen to them afterwards, and they just say, "Oh, it's just such a relief because I've practiced that, for so long, for 4 years, and it's such a relief to see it come to fruition." And the other interesting thing that I take from our sporting environment is that you clearly have to, and it's we talk about it in charity and in business, you have to have 100% trust in the people that you're working with. I would imagine in the Marines, if you don't trust anyone, you can't go to war. Simple as that. You can't take anyone on the helicopter that can't be trusted to do their job. I think in a sporting environment, particularly in rugby, if someone doesn't do their job, I get hurt. If I don't do my job, the guy next to me gets hurt. And I think it's important that we have that trust. And I wanted to talk a little bit about charity. This is what I've been very, very interested in the whole of today because a number of years ago I set up something called the Dallaglio Foundation, and it got me playing rugby got me very, very excited because it was if you take away a lot of the technicalities around the game of rugby, of which there are many, and I appreciate that there's a lot of skill. Certainly in the numbers from 9 to 15, there's a lot of skill anyway. But it is about the power of the human spirit, and it is about being able to having the ability to persuade people, in my eyes anyway, to persuade people to do things that they don't necessarily believe they can do themselves. Now, in a lot of teams, you have one or two people that genuinely believe that if you're playing the All Blacks, you're going to go out and win. But I can assure you, not everyone thinks that at the beginning. And it's about being a powerful persuader, I guess, in a team environment, and being able to push the right emotional touch points in people to get the best out of them, and for them to get the best out of themselves. To get players who ordinarily view themselves as being 5 out of 10 to suddenly perform at levels that they had no idea they were capable of doing. And, that for me is fundamentally what excited me about playing top-level sport, because, I felt that there's something powerful that you can achieve together that you can't always achieve on your own. And I was brought up with that belief by my parents, certainly by my mother, by my late mother, that if you really believe in something and you really go for it and you really shoot for the moon, then you will be amongst the stars, and that nothing is unobtainable. And that's a really nice way to be brought up, I guess. Certainly found it very nice, and it's something that I would really try and pass on to everyone. But as most of us know, it's not about luck. It is about hard work. It is about teamwork. It's about drive. And it's more often than not about having that great support network. That might be a few of us together. Not being quite so powerful there, but it's quite interesting because, a lot of you work in charity, and many of you know far more than I do about running charities. I'm just learning and applying some of the lessons that I've learned. But certainly the reasons for setting up the charity, I wanted to consolidate all the things that were happening across many, many different things. I was getting pulled in lots of different directions by lots of different charities, and they're all wonderful. You're all wonderful. We've all got, we're all raising money for great causes. So I think it was about consolidating that. And, it was important for me to learn, to understand, well, if you want to launch a charity, what do you do? So I wanted to sort of create some sort of flagship event where we were able to tap into people that would want to support the charity. So I came up with something called 8 Rocks, which was a flagship event. No discovery to learn. I played number 8 and Rocks because it was a bit of a party. And we created an annual event, a flagship event that tapped into a network and into the ambition that I wanted for the charity. It was hugely successful. We raised £600,000 the first time we ran the event in one night, which is no mean feat. But it was also very highly resourced. high-cost events. So there was a need to find added benefits for the charity as well, such as building a database and gaining that kind of the goodwill from the supporters. The next big thing I got involved in was cycling. I created something called the Dallaglio Cycle Slam. As you can see, I'm not really built for cycling. In fact, I'm not built for cycling at all. And I wanted to create a mass participation event, because I think with charities, some charities we see on, in the public domain, but others unfortunately sit back a little bit. And I've felt the need to engage people and get out there and do something, because it's about doing things together. Nothing I ever achieved in rugby was, as you can see, was ever achieved on my own. It was always through the help of, and the talent of many, many people and pulling people together. So the Cycle Slam was something that we ended up cycling from Rome to Edinburgh back in 2010. We went around all the Six Nations venues, and we raised about £1.2 million in total, which again was a great effort. But it was about targeting high-value individuals who were able to get a high return with using a relatively small number of people through gift aid, which I thought was a very, very interesting and powerful mechanic, where each of the riders were fundraising. And of course, for those of you who followed cycling, we replicated that again just recently, where we cycled from the Olympic Stadium in Athens to the Olympic Stadium in London. I brought in Andrew Freddie Flintoff to slightly change the dynamic of the bike ride, I'll be honest. But the target was to raise 2012, 2.012 million, and for obvious reasons, although I had to fine a few people for asking me why we were trying to raise 2.012 million. But it was a phenomenal event, and again about pulling people together for a common cause. Moving forward, I recognise that the charity and we as charities can't always work on an events-based model, because it's not it's not a sustainable financial model. So I was looking at other income streams, such as long-term corporate partnerships, and how we can plan really the charity for a much more longer-term legacy. The other consideration is how we look after how do we all look after our donors. We recognise that the cost of acquisition is much greater than the cost of retention, so our focus is how we look after our supporters and feel that they're getting continuity. Are they being engaged and excited about the work that we're all doing as charities? And I think as a small charity, which we are, I think it's important to recognise that we need to invest early on in the right database and the right resources in order to allow us to help manage the journeys that we're on. The other area which I'm fascinated by is developing other income streams outside of costs and what costs people we apportion to our charity and you apportion to your charity is clearly very controversial. It's a very important point. It's the first thing people ask me about. Well, how much, if I give you £1, how much goes to the charity? And it's about creating other revenue streams so that people, when they do give you money, can have the knowledge that that money is going directly to the cause that they're supporting. And I think that that's quite crucial, certainly for the Dallaglio Foundation. Maybe creating a trading arm, different concepts. There's brilliant ideas out in the audience, I'm sure, but coming up with maybe a concept of a wine club, for instance, something we're launching. We've partnered with a very successful wine business where we will go to our supporters, we will offer them the chance to buy wine and various other products, and the profit will be donated back to the foundation, but it'll go into the trading arm of the company, which will keep separate from the other side of the business. So there's lots of different ideas going on in the industry around how we can create revenue outside of direct fundraising through events. The other thing is I think as we are, the need to be more intelligent, as has already been discussed by Mark, as how we present our case for support and how we recognise. It's not given that individuals are just going to give money to us all as charities. And what we've done at the foundation is we've created something called a rugby programme, where we've given gifted players a chance through our scholarship programme. We've identified sort of fairly talented 16-year-old rugby players and given them the opportunity to immerse themselves in an environment that excels in rugby. The chap on the right there is James Caitlin. He was at a comprehensive school in Bristol until a few months ago. He's been the first recipient of the Dallaglio Foundation scholarship. He plays second row for England under 16s. I know he looks a lot bigger than 16, doesn't he? He's just finished his GCSEs and he's just finished his first week at Millfield School, and he'll spend his next 2 years at Millfield, through a foundation scholarship. And again, Ben Woods, the chap in the middle of the picture, started at RGS High Wycombe, fly half for England under 16s. It's about giving these guys an opportunity that possibly they wouldn't otherwise be able to get themselves. So that's part of the rugby programme. The other piece is around the Duke of Edinburgh. I've partnered with a charity called the Duke of Edinburgh Awards. And what we want to do is put the Duke of Edinburgh award scheme into 6 of the 12 Premiership rugby clubs, certainly in the next year, and create centres of excellence so that children outside of the rugby can go to those rugby clubs and take part and get accredited and gain a qualification that they wouldn't otherwise be able to have got unless they've gone to a decent school. And we intend to do that with 6 more rugby clubs over the next few years. And the final piece is around social change, and this is one that I'm very, very passionate about. It's called Rugby for Change. It's working with disadvantaged children in pupil referral units and introducing them to rugby and allowing them to make decisions that will make better rugby decisions, better informed social decisions that will change their lives. These kids don't trust anyone. Okay, I mean, they're Rugby for Change's first job, my first job, our first job is to gain their trust. To keep our promises to them. They often don't have any dreams or any aspirations at all. We use that trust that we build, that confidence that we build in them for them to gain, and develop those aspirations. They're fairly often, these kids are quite scarred. We can create a safe place for them, hopefully, to grow up. And once we get that trust and we get that confidence, great things can happen, I believe. They don't often have reliable, long-term, sustainable role models in their lives. Often, many of them either from broken families or don't have any parents at all. So we're putting a system in place that gives them a chance to get on that journey by providing them the support that they need, taking them from childhood right up to livelihood. So, as I mentioned before, the Dallaglio Foundation Rugby for Change coaches are often ex-offenders themselves from similar backgrounds, so who better to give them that inspiration to become productive members of society. I know that there's lots of wonderful charities out there. I wanted to share with you a little bit about rugby, but also a little bit about the charity. It's been fascinating listening to Mark. I'm going to pick up on that. I'm going to read that report, and so will my accountant, hopefully. We're growing as a charity. You're growing out there. I think we've had some things said today that have made us think a lot differently about the way we approach certain things, whether it's the way we run our charities, the way we think about investing in our charities, and the way we might even fundraise. So to everyone at Rathbones, thank you very much. I'd ask you as individuals running charities to challenge yourself, challenge the team around you, to look at things slightly different and engage with people in a different way. Anyway, thank you very much.